Nuts and bolts, looking at synchronous versus asynchronous, formal and informal norms, etiquette, and cues. This will be a very brief movie, but going over these basic concepts when talking about fully online or blended learning really is important for some of the very reasons we're going to discuss. Here we go. So why bother examining things that are considered so basic we just expect everyone to know them? Well, let's start with Maslow. There are safety needs, and if we go back to our previous PowerPoint/video where we looked at the revised 21st century Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the blended and online learner, there are safety issues. There are issues of the students needing to know all the different norms. Do we go out of our way to discuss them, or do we just assume because these kids tend to be so technologically and media literate that they should know this stuff? Sometimes with blended and fully online instructors, we feel like going over explicit norms, discussing cues, discussing things that we had to learn, we're almost embarrassed because for our learners, we just kind of expect that this is old hat stuff for these kids who've grown up with this. And by kids, make no mistake, by kids, I mean people all the way up until their late 20s, early 30s, which tells you how old I am. And we all know what happens when we assume. We cannot let any assumptions stop us from ensuring that we clarify expectations, norms, why we're using one particular mode or medium over another. We have to be transparent with learners of all ages. It's clarifying those expectations that, again, goes back to Maslow, lets people feel safe, lets them know where their boundaries are, lets them know how far they can push and still be okay in the environment. And our focus this week is learning experiences. So by going over the nuts and bolts now, we can ensure that what we craft for our learners is relevant and safe, and they can focus on the experience and not have any affective worries getting in the way of their cognition. Synchronous versus asynchronous. At this point in the class, you may be going, seriously? Now? Synchronous, sync, happens at the same time. Our live Adobe Connect meetings. If I call you on the phone and we chat, synchronous. Async, I always call it across time. Different. The threaded discussions, working in a wiki. Those are asynchronous experiences. And they are different, and they serve very different purposes. So another thing to keep in mind with both blended and fully online learners is if a student is seeming to struggle, fight the environment, not able to fully engage, perhaps the first thing you want to look at is there too much asynchronous going on for this student? Does he or she need more synchronous experiences? Let's remember, when we're dealing with synchronous, even if there's no video, but obviously it's most relevant when we're talking about with video or if we're in the same environment on ground, the eyeball effect. Those students who are incredibly self-conscious, when they're able to engage without feeling like someone is looking at them, are then able to settle into their own cognition, are able to let go of their own outside issues and focus on self-actualization. Focus on learning, experiencing, and feeling the intended learning so they can construct meaning. There are many students, again, of all ages, for whom that eyeball effect truly is so disenfranchising that it completely negates any other positive aspect of that environment. And this relates to last week. Fluidity versus reflective. Remember, these are different concepts. We looked at them under the umbrella of more social learning theories. But if we're going for fluidity, we want synchronous experiences. We want to be able to hear how the student can speak or write extemporaneously or be able to put something together on the fly versus that act of reflection which demands time Asynchronous activities are brilliant for reflection. Synchronous activities, not so hot. But for fluidity, synchronous far outweighs asynchronous. So formal and informal norms. Formal, explicit, stated policy. Assumed cultural language. Those are the informal norms. The way we expect people to treat us, to speak with us. When someone sends an email that's all in caps, well, to someone who understands that informal norm, that's shouting. It's obnoxious. It's rude. But to some people, that's showing excitement and enthusiasm. In a synchronous environment, informal norms can cause a lot of problems. The same way when you travel to another country. If you don't know the formal and informal norms, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Whether it's the way you point at something in certain countries, if you point with one finger versus another versus a thumb versus an elbow, it's sending a very, very different message. We forget about this when we're working in an online environment because for most of us who are over 30, we kind of treat it like it's a game. It's not real. But for learners, particularly those under the age of 30, those experiences in synchronous virtual environments, whether they're avatar-based or text-based, they're very, very real. We want to be sure we're using tools for specific reasons and communicate that to our students because they could, and often do, because of informal norms, they immediately have an image of what a tool should be used for, or whether it's something that, oh, that's only for the advanced learners, or that kind of tool is something that only gets foisted on us falling behinders. Netiquette and cues. Netiquette is online etiquette. Now this extends to both synchronous and asynchronous. Email, threaded conversations. Again, writing in all caps, netiquette, that's shouting. It's considered incredibly rude. But you go read a blog, read postings, you'll see people typing in all caps because they're excited or they're happy or they just aren't paying attention. We have students who come in who know how to use their computers very, very well, but they don't understand netiquette. And these are the types of things that can come back to haunt you. Emails can live forever. Postings on Facebook can live forever. There are many stories of young people trying to break into different industries or businesses and trying to connect with someone who's huge in the field, the CEO, the big important person. And they send something so informal and so inappropriate, so off the netiquette chain, that person is literally blackballed from the company, from the industry. But what about cues? Well, this can be incredibly tricky. This is another reason why I always ensure there are synchronous experiences in my online classes. I do have these discussions and look for cues with learners of all ages. We need to pay attention to both the individual as well as the class, because sometimes an entire group of learners can sometimes pick up on something and there's a weird vibe that's going around. Both synchronous and asynchronous. I don't know if anyone's ever had the incredibly unpleasant experience of have a discussion board that folds in on itself and turns into massive flame wars or goes so far off a topic, there's no way the professor, the instructor, the teacher can pull it back on. So we need to watch for cues. One person posting off topic, you shoot them an email, say, hey, I appreciate that you're passionate about this, but can we pull it back in? There's a reason we're discussing this. It starts to happen with several people. You need to nip that in the bud. Watch both the behavior and the word choices and the actions of the individuals and your whole class. Now, what about word choice? Sometimes the language, both in asynchronous and synchronous, can be a huge cue that there's something else going on, particularly if you're dealing with a student who doesn't seem to be directly engaging, won't answer your questions. If the video cam is on, won't look into the camera. Those are the types of things you want to address one-on-one. Please don't do it in a large group. Again, whether it's just voice or whether the video's on, don't address odd cues in front of a group. Shoot them an IM, shoot them an email. Don't set somebody up, but pay attention, because the choice of words, if they're using negative verbs, if they're describing different kinds of theories and they always come off in violent terms or scary terms, or their correlations tend to be very negative, there can very well be something going on. And I will say, for those of us who do teach fully online, sometimes, going back to the eyeball effect, sometimes we can be that one person, that a learner who has a problem, he's been hurt, something bad is going on at home, she can't talk about it. Sometimes we're their one person they can reach out to and feel safe to because we don't see them face to face. So these types of things, even though we're busy and we're focused on the learning and we're trying to get this done and that done and come on, and we do have to pay attention to those cues. When we meet face to face, if it's blended, or if we are in video with synchronous over distance, body language is huge. And I know most of you know this, but again, it's crucial to remember, because we tend to think, well, if it's electronically mediated, there's really nothing I can do. And that is incorrect. I'm sorry, as an instructor of students of all ages, their welfare is your job. Changes in their patterns of behavior are huge. Again, please don't call these out in public in any way, shape, or form. Don't mention it on a threaded discussion. Anything that you notice is a change in a pattern of behavior. And I hate to bring this up, but if it's a massive change in behavior, it could very well be cheating, plagiarism, having someone else literally log in for you. I hate to say it, but I've caught plagiarism because I've met with the student synchronously and then read his or her work and looked at what he or she is doing in the threaded discussions, and there's no way it was the same human being. Information that a student is too openly sharing, or information that is being held oddly close, those are all cues worth taking note of. Please do pay attention to all of this. So here we are. We've got all these different very basic concepts, and what do we do with them? The first thing we do is not forget them, because we can and we will and we do. These basic things need to be discussed openly. Let people have that safety and security rather than having to try and figure it out from what's going on around them. Thank you.